Hello everybody, and welcome back to Game Critiques. Mario is one of the most well-known and beloved icons in gaming, and it's not hard to see why. His games very rarely fail to deliver. They've defined genres, generations, arguably the concept of what games are as a whole, multiple times, with masterpiece after masterpiece for decades. But Super Mario 3D World is a bit of an odd one. It launched on the Wii U to little fanfare and relatively small sales for the franchise. Is this perhaps indicative of a lower quality, or is 3D World another classic as you've probably come to expect from the series? Let's talk about it by first discussing the gameplay. The thing that I believe to be the most important for any platformer is the movement. It can make or break a game. Fun responsive movement can make up for subpar level design, while poor sluggish movement can ruin a game with great potential. But it's clear Nintendo knows what they're doing after more than 3 decades of putting out these games. 3D World doesn't have the uniquely expressive movement of games like Super Mario Odyssey or Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, but its movement is just about as tight and responsive as it gets. You always go where you want to go, and especially in the Switch version, you always get there quickly. It's impressive that, even with the Switch version's faster speed, you still feel totally in control of each and every one of the 5 playable characters at all times. These 5 characters all have slight movement tweaks, but they all feel great to control even though those small tweaks can really change how you play the game. So not only does this game have tight, polished movement at all times, it's got lots of variety in the movement through the different characters. It's also worth noting that the mid-air dive taken from Odyssey and put into the Switch re-release does actually do a lot to make the movement more expressive. Making fancy trick jumps you couldn't do in the Wii U version feels immensely satisfying, and the dive feels just as quick, responsive, and precise as every other move you can do. The thing that I believe to be the best in Super Mario 3D World is the level design. The sheer quantity of interesting ideas in this game is incredible. The world map is themed like any new Super Mario map would be, with themes like grass, ice, desert, etc. But the levels themselves rarely follow that theme at all. Tons of them have their own unique themes, not seen in any other level. Crazy stuff like neon circuses and bizarre space blocks and whatnot is just everywhere. And the platforming in each and every one is practically perfect. The obstacles have tons of variety and are laid out in a way such that they feel like they perfectly work for every different character in a different way. Take a look at this for example. Jumping over the gaps with Luigi and dashing on the path with Toad both feel great and totally different. It's amazing. This game also doesn't just have traditional platforming levels. Sometimes you'll be racing through a Mario Kart track or solving a Zelda dungeon. Sometimes you won't even be controlling a standard playable character. You may have these Plessy levels, which are auto runners, or these Captain Toad levels, which are puzzle levels where you can't even jump. And they all feel great. They're all designed so well. Except for one type of level. The dreaded auto-scroller. In a game where finding new ways to traverse each level quickly is so fun, where there are so many possibilities, auto-scrollers really stand out, and not in a good way. There are way too many of them in this game, and they move way too slowly. This is especially noteworthy in the Switch version, where you run so quickly. It's incredibly easy to outrun any of them. You spend most of your time on these levels just standing still and waiting for them to scroll faster. It's a real shame how often you have to do this, and make up a big chunk of levels, including lots of boss levels. But the platforming in them is still fun, and the quality of the other levels more than makes up for this issue. One of the main features advertised for 3D World was the multiplayer, and it's clear to see why. In it you traverse each level as you normally would, except up to 3 of your friends are doing it with you. It's super fun and frantic, it adds even more to the variety of each level, as playing in multiplayer gives yet another new experience. One of the best parts of the multiplayer is the crown. The person with the highest number of points in one level gets a crown for the next, though it's dropped when they're hit by an enemy or a ground pound from a teammate. Giving a small thing to compete over really adds to the excitement of the moment-to-moment gameplay. It never gets dull fighting to constantly either defend or hunt for the crown while still having to normally play through each level. This game really does have a surprising amount of variety and replayability. Doing a quick solo playthrough of this game may not take too long, but with all the different level themes and setups, collectibles, characters, and gameplay modes, there ends up being tons to do. I've already put more time into this than any of the games in 3D All-Stars, all of which are 100% completed. Something that particularly shocks me is how well the newly added online mode works. Nintendo and online are not things that generally go well together. I can't stand playing Super Smash Bros. Ultimate or Super Mario Maker 2 with others over the internet. But, in my experience with 3D World, everything worked mostly fine. There was a bit of input lag, but nowhere close to that of Smash, and the game never chugged like Super Mario Maker 2 constantly does. However, I've heard varying reports about this, so it seems it may vary a lot based on how strong everyone's internet connection is. Still though, for me, this is probably the best online experience I've had on my Switch, maybe outside of the Monster Hunter Rise demo. The other new additions are also pretty great. If I had any major problem with the Wii U version, it'd have to be the somewhat slow pace. You ran super slowly and it could get somewhat frustrating, especially in the more open levels. Thankfully, they greatly upped the running speed in the Switch version, and now this isn't a problem at all. Speeding through levels as Toad is all the more exhilarating, and the boredom of slogging through levels as Peach is totally gone. I will again admit that the auto-scrollers are worse now. The scrolling was already slow relative to your speed, and now it's even worse. But for the levels that I actually wanted to play in the first place, they're all improved. The mid-air dive is also a really good addition. As I briefly mentioned before, it really does a lot to add to the expressiveness of the movement. It allows for a lot more close calls, a lot more fun skips, a lot more fancy tricks. Using it to reach collectibles or make it back to a narrowly missed platform always felt great. So yeah, 3D World plays fantastically, as one would expect from a Mario game. But it's not the only campaign in this Switch package. It's time to talk about the gameplay of the newly added Bowser's Fury mode. Bowser's Fury is an entirely new campaign tacked onto the Switch re-release of 3D World. It has one big world full of platforming challenges where you can go pretty much anywhere and do pretty much anything. It feels similar to a Super Mario Odyssey Kingdom, but it's much larger and it clearly took a few cues from Breath of the Wild in terms of structuring the world. One concern I initially had was that the platforming would stop being the focus and the gameplay would get a bit repetitive. I thought 3D World's limited movement could only go so far, but thankfully I was proven wrong. The game still has tons of unique, fleshed out platforming challenges just spread out around the world in a different way. You'll be challenged to do things like skate down a big, complicated slide of sorts, or climb to the peak of a flying island. And all these challenges feel different, but super well thought out, and super fun. They're basically like standard 3D World levels, except you have much more freedom in tackling them and much more exploring to do between them. Throughout the campaign, the giant Fury Bowser will show up and start attacking you. You usually have the option of grabbing a power-up to grow giant yourself so you can fight him off. These fights are great, the way every level is recontextualized when you're 100 times the size you were is super clever. The only problem I have with them is their lack of variety and their sheer abundance. Every 15 minutes or so Bowser pops up, and none of the fights with him, aside from the final showdown, are particularly different. This can get in the way of exploration and be really annoying, and it just gets repetitive doing the same fight again and again, no matter how good the fight is. Repetition is a bit of an issue with Bowser's Fury in general. Not only do you have to fight the same boss again and again, but lots of the cat shines, the game's main collectible, are very formulaic. Every island holding a platforming challenge has a cat shine that's just behind some blocks Fury Bowser has to break. The only challenge here is just waiting for him to appear, and they do this like 15 times. The lucky cat shines in the post-game are even worse. By the time you're going for those, you've likely already explored the entire game world. So you just have to sit there and wait for Fury Bowser to appear to get a chance at grabbing them. And there are 5. My last hour of the 6 hours it took for me to 100% complete Bowser's Fury was spent just sitting there, waiting for Fury Bowser to appear after I'd already gotten the 95 other cat shines and explored the whole world. But at least you can skip out on all this repetitive stuff if you're not going for 100%, which doesn't give you much of a reward anyway. The game also has a few weird bugs, stuff I'd never expect from a 3D Mario game. But they never majorly impacted gameplay, and I can forgive that with COVID and everything else going on in the world right now. Bowser's Fury lacks the polish of 3D World, but it brings with it the same platforming greatness and all-new exploration greatness. Overall, I give the gameplay of Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury a 9 out of 10. The title, or titles, may lack the epic scale and atmosphere of games like Super Mario 64, Sunshine, Galaxy, and Odyssey, but this package is still packed to the brim with super creative and fun platforming gameplay. I've been coming back to this game somewhat regularly since the original Wii U release. It's just so easy to digest and it's great for parties, and I'm sure I'll be continuing to do the same with the new Switch version. Now let's talk about the story and characters of Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. I don't think it'll surprise anyone that this section is going to be pretty short. I could describe the story of 3D World in a single sentence. Bowser kidnapped some fairies. You saved them. And I do wish there was a little more to it. The story they told in Galaxy was great, and it really made the game feel a lot more epic. But 3D World wasn't trying to be epic in the first place. The story isn't important to the game, and it never gets in the way. Bowser's Fury has a similarly light story. There's a bit more to it, with some new elements like a giant Bowser and an all-new world being introduced, but these things aren't even really ever explained. I wish they were, as this game clearly is going for a more epic feel in base 3D World, but again, it still works as a great platformer without any real story. It doesn't need a great story, and what is there isn't bothersome. Overall, I guess I'll give the story of Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury a 7 out of 10. Nothing about it is particularly good, but it's definitely never bad, and it never detracts from the game in any major way. Now, let's talk about the visuals and sound. Super Mario 3D World is a gorgeous game. It's got a similar art style to Mario Kart 8, a similarly gorgeous Wii U game. The models can be a little too shiny and look sort of plasticky, especially in levels with rain or water, but that almost feels intentional. 3D World levels feel a lot more like little dioramas and intense adventures. The colors really pop, the models look smooth, and lots of little details are rendered with great fidelity. There are a few odd backgrounds, but this is just about as beautiful as a Switch game can get. Performance is also smooth, at least in docked mode. It ran at a consistent 60 FPS throughout the entire game. The soundtrack of Super Mario 3D World is similarly excellent. When I first saw the game, I was worried it'd have a more generic soundtrack like 3D Land. But luckily I was very wrong. It's got lots of bombastic music with a unique, playful tone. I've had some of these songs stuck in my head for over 7 years now, and I don't see them leaving anytime soon. The sound effects are also just as good as those of any other Mario title. The character designs of 3D World are some of the highlights of the game in my opinion. There's not too much new stuff, but what is new is great, and what's old is also great. The renditions of the 4 main playable characters are some of my favorite versions of them in recent years. They're brimming with character despite never saying a word. Things like their facial expressions and animations really characterize them quite well, especially for Luigi and Peach. Plus, he's also a great addition to the Mario universe. My favorite design in the game, though, would have to be Fury Bowser. It has an interesting mix of the modern and retro proportions for the Mario cast, reminding me a lot of his Yoshi's Island rendition. And he's got a unique color scheme, and is often portrayed in a cool art style and art for the game. Speaking of Fury Bowser, let's move on to talking more about Bowser's Fury. Like I was saying, the characters look great, the visuals are similarly outstanding, and I think I like the soundtrack more than that of the base game. It's got its own unique tone and tons of catchy themes. It's not perfect though, the overly shiny models do stand out a bit more in a game that is quite adventurous. Performance is mostly smooth, but there are a few hiccups, and as I said earlier, there are a few visual bugs. Still, the overall presentation of Bowser's Fury is excellent. The visuals and sound of Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury are among the best the Switch has to offer. I can nitpick here and there, but even over 7 years after the original release of 3D World, the presentation is excellent by today's standards. I give the visuals and sound of 3D World plus Bowser's Fury a 10 out of 10. In conclusion, Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury is an incredible package with 2 great games. Both are super fun to play and they're super replayable. They're great alone and with friends. They've got great movement, great level design, and tons of variety. The music will be stuck in your head for years. The art style is super eye-catching. It's not perfect, but with all the great content that is there, it's not too hard to overlook the annoying auto-scrollers in 3D World, or the repetition in Bowser's Fury. I give Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury a 9 out of 10. Thank you guys for watching this video, I really appreciate it. If you liked it, I'd also really appreciate it if you liked, commented, hit the notification bell, and or subscribe. I'd also recommend you check out some of my other content, like my video on why I believe the Wii U is better than the Nintendo Switch, and my review of Cyber Shadow. If you want to see additional updates about the channel, follow me on Twitter or Instagram, or join my Discord server. All linked in the description below. Thank you all for watching, and have a great rest of your day.